Welcome. So we have a Not My Type presentation here. What do you guys launched your website? You're going all in on Enneagram typing?
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm Jack. This is Jessica. We
Right.
run a business basically trying to take the Enneagram out of the world of pseudoscience and into some actual science by measuring behavior as a way of typing, which is kind of our primary niche, I suppose, since that's not the way the Enneagram has been viewed for most
Yeah.
of history.
And you guys have been in this for a while, sort of hiding behind the scenes, like super into Enneagram. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story on getting into Enneagram and why specifically that type of typology?
Yeah, we got into the Enneagram separately and met in a Facebook group in the Enneagram. Really cool coincidences. Found out that Jack was going to move 2 minutes away from me, which was crazy. And then we got together, met, and both passionate about this, and then started hardcore collecting real people in the form of 10-minute interviews, playing with questions. And that was 2.5 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
It's been a while. So that was to be honest with you, I'm not terribly scientific by nature. I tended to sort of see the Enneagram as like a fun concept, but I didn't need any real proof of it in real time. And Jessica's not like that. And she just encouraged me to start getting videos of everyone I know. And we kind of stumbled into this realization of oh, people's types are happening 24/7 all the time in pretty much everything you're saying, doing, the way you look at the world, the way you speak, how quickly you speak, how much your eye moves, all that stuff.
So do you want to run us down a little bit what Enneagram is, first of all? Because it's not, you guys aren't taking it as like a genetic thing, you're taking it as like a response thing to trauma or something?
I would say it's both. I think the Enneagram is a system. It's just a map. It's a circle with 9 points. It's a circle with 9 points on it that represents 9 different functions of the psyche as it responds to life and its challenges. Sure, you could look at it that way. I think
so I understand it's like 9 different balance scales, I guess. It's like, because each number has like an imbalance and a balance state, right?
I don't know if I think anyone can be balanced or imbalanced at different times of their lives. So I don't think the balance or imbalance is what produces a type. I think a type could be a product of someone's environment or their genetic code, or most likely both. I don't think it's really something that
because like in Jungian typology, you have poles, right? You've got opposites. But then in Enneagram, you have like 9 different places on the map where they've got like unhealthy states and healthy states, right?
Yes. Well, that was one of the theories of the Enneagram. And I remember talking to one of the people who was there when that theory was brought out. And she said,
interesting.
It's very much like, because it's a symbol, right? So like, how do you interpret this symbol correctly? Everyone's still trying to figure this out. And so that idea of moving to health and unhealth was thrown out there, and people were like, yeah, maybe. That caught on. We're not finding necessarily that in our data. Like an unhealthy X number doesn't look like another number. An unhealthy 6 looks like an unhealthy 6. A healthy 6
exactly. Right.
Yeah. But the concept of balance and imbalance is tricky when you bring up the Enneagram, because there are all of these associations about what that looks like, and there are all these lines on the diagram. But basically, to summarize what your question is of what is the Enneagram, it's a map of 9 types, and everything divides into 3s. So the math of it is actually pretty profound, and that's like a whole different conversation. But it always breaks down into sets of 3. So there's kind of this concept that underpins the Enneagram holistically called the rule of 3, which is that everything in the world has an active force, and then a reactive force, and then basically a reconciling force or a unifying force. And so that is sort of the symbol, the symbol's whole shindig. And so every type has a symbolic representation of one of those 3 forces, basically.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'm just gonna question you a little bit on Enneagram. So so people who are more used to Jungian typology, it's dividing things into 2s, our psyche into 2s, which is like one valid way of looking at things. And then Enneagram is trying to divide our psyche into 3s, which is another way to divide the population, I guess, right?
I'd say so. Yeah.
Yeah. So
your question, even as you were asking, I was like, polarity. Like there's polarity in certain types for sure, but like in terms of as a whole thing, we're not really dealing a lot with polarity. It's more like identifying mechanisms and behaviors and
I think I mean, yeah, there's a triangle that's central to the Enneagram, and the concept is you're basically taking polarity. There's end one and end two, and then you're adding a third point, which it's like kind of an added dimension, I suppose. It's taking things from 2D to 3D conceptually.
Right.
So there's
So,
still
like,
polarity, but it's just an equal degree of distance between point A and B and C.
but it's not valid to view Enneagram in terms of like cognitive function sort of thing where there's an opposite, right? They're sort of complementary in a way.
I think you could argue that because you take any point on the circle of 9 types, and if you go directly across the circle, it's stuck between 2 types. So there's no like if you take point 9, which is at the top of the circle, and then go all the way to the bottom, you're stuck between 4 and 5. And so there's not really an idea within the Enneagram that there are 2 overt opposites. It's more kind of that the opposite end of something is the combination of 2 factors.
And you're seeing that the circle is actually a good representation of how the types are divided, like you're dividing an actual circle, or it's just sort of a visual representation of a way you can display the types?
So far, the circle has still provided a lot of profound insight. And I think that was one of the most exciting things about the data, because right now I think we're over like 1,200 videos and still finding that the system held up because it didn't have to. This could have just been some like esoteric thing that like, you know, like Harry Potter houses are fun, but I don't know if it would like hold under the scrutiny of 1,200 people. So that like, in order to even like do this, in order to even like provide our services, we needed to check that. And that like is still working.
Yeah.
Oh, that was what shocked me the most, is that Jessica was just sort of like, I mean, in our system, there's this concept of like something called the social instinct, which is what drives us to connect with other people or have relationships or have a tribe. And Jessica has that instinct at the bottom of her stacking. So her world is pretty small. Just it's kind of a more introverted stacking that she has. And I have kind of the opposite problem where there's not enough introversion. And so what you get is this 2 very different types of people who sort of stumbled into each other. And she was just kind of like, you know, all of these people, you should start getting videos of them. And I think maybe that was because you wanted to learn. I
wanted a variety of types. I had like 10 people in my life, you know?
Right.
And I just didn't have access to like all these, because with the Enneagram and how we combine it with the instinctual variance, that's 7,776 like types that you can have. And I want to like, this is nerdy, but Pokemon, like I wanted to collect them all. I wanted Enneagram Bird Bingo, you know? So, and I couldn't based on, you know, my set of data of what was around me.
Yeah. Okay. So you leveraged your friend here.
Yes.
and then I think it kind of became a thing where like I sort of ended up taking it over in a way. Like I suddenly had the vision of like, oh, we're finding real science and now we have to share it with the world. That's like really kind of the way I view it right now. I mean, it's a delight and it's a lot of fun too. So I don't want to view it as just an obligation. But to be honest with you, the specific behavioral trends behind specific combinations of types, it's pretty astounding and pretty wild. And so I feel like, at least I can speak for myself, I can't speak for Jessica, but I feel kind of like I'm on a mission to like share that with people broadly.
And me, not so much. Like, I love what we're doing. I love that we're bringing it to people. I definitely want to help people, but I will squirrel away in the data. Like, I will just sit there.
Well, it's good. It's a perfect pair then. That's nice. Yeah.
Exactly. Because I'm going, I'm triangulating, I'm making sure, and he's adding chaos in by adding more people. And like, I'm just trying to keep this together. And no, it's really, really, really a good, I think a good
dynamic. Yeah. That's good. And your website looks killer, by the way. So check it out in the description. Yeah. Good job, Jack.
Thank you.
And so so I kept bothering you guys. Can we present this because you guys type me and you guys like, I don't know how good you are at everyone else, but I think in terms of typology, I've been typed by a few different people. And with you guys, I really felt seen. Like I've never felt as seen by any other typologist than by you guys. Like you guys really, I feel, nailed me.
Great.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So when I tell people, because I'm not that good, not that knowledgeable in Enneagram, so I tell people what my type is, and they're like, no, you're a 6 wing 5. So like, do you know how I can tell people why I'm a 5 and not a 6? I have no clue what that even means.
Yes, you can tell people you're a 5 and not a 6 because you create, you don't attach. If you were a 6, you would be attaching. You would be less of a social problem. If like the constant, like, yes, I'm going to disagree with you. Yes, 6 can't really do that. 6 can do that if it's backed up by like something outside of itself, because they don't inherently trust themselves. But 5 can just be like, no, they're the, like 5 and 7 are the overconfident heads. And so they can just be like, nope. And 6 has to, 6, I'm a 6. I need something outside of me to prove it and be like, this is why I love the data. Because I have something outside of proof to say like, hey, no, it's correct here, because I'm not that trustworthy, even though I am. But that would be my first thought.
And I think there are other specific like elements of type 5 that I could point out in you. So something that's really intriguing is that there are specific like other psychological theories. So one of them that Jessica just brought up is the theory of object relations, which says that there's sort of a basic blueprint behind how the child learns to relate to the parent. And that gets replicated in almost every other interaction in your life. And so that's like one theory, and it maps really nicely onto the map, not just conceptually, but also in the language we see in our data. But there are other concepts. There's this concept of harmonics, which says that every type has either a negative, neutral, or positive charge. So once again, you get a set of 3 where there's a polarity, but there's something between them as well. And 5 is what we call a competency type, meaning that it has that neutral charge or like a lack of charge. So within the head center, which Jessica just brought up, like 5, 6, and 7 are all concerned with information. Like, what do I do with what I don't know? And most people in the head center, because everyone has a head, so we all have a way we deal with missing information. Most people have a 6 fix in the head center, meaning that they're dealing with the unknown through reactivity. It's sort of a negative charge that says, I will overcome and overcompensate for everything I might not know. So I'll do double my homework and make sure that I've covered all my bases. And then the second most common head fix is a 7 fix. So 7 in the headspace, which I have, it's a positive charge. So it's flippant. It says the things that I don't know about aren't threats to me. And so, because basically the head center is trying to manage fear. That's really what it's about. The issue of information is there's anxiety that's produced by not knowing things. And so 6 like sort of plunges into that anxiety and tries to combat it with more information and more like evidence to just like put away their fears, I guess. 7 sort of dismisses their fears with positivity. And then 5 is the neutral charge. So it's the least common headspace because it deals with fear through neutrality. It says, if I remove myself from the situation emotionally
And my emotions, yeah.
and just observe it and do something well, if I can control myself and master whatever's in front of me, I don't need to worry about these other things outside of me. And so 5 has this sort of, it's a much more confident feeling type than 6. Because 6 is sort of at the mercy of its environment and it's reacting against it, whereas 5 is sort of neutral. And it's also a withdrawn type. That's another thing too. Like 6 is not withdrawn. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you're also social dominant. So in terms of your like studies, because 5 can be very niche, it's going to be pointed at people. It's going to make you a little bit more normal than like 5, which can show up kind of weird.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So just wanted to say that like I am a person who is vouching for you guys as being really good at what you're doing, because like I definitely feel seen and felt seen when you analyzed the video. Like, and so like even in terms of the social thing that you picked up on, the social self-pres that you picked up on, for me, getting that under, like I never heard it positioned in that way. Like I never tried to systematize that kind of thing. But then when OPS came around and started doing the social types, I'm just like, oh yeah, like you guys said, I'm a 4 basically. And OPS comes along and says I'm a 4 too. And so basically you're seeing sort of similar things in that regard, I think.
To clarify, you mean like a number 4 in the social types, not a 4 in our system.
Right. Yeah. Number 4 in the social types. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So definitely I want to vouch for you guys as being really good. And so can you tell me why that is? Like what are you guys doing that other Enneagrammers aren't doing?
That's a great question. So we have a few competitors that offer similar typing services. And I think I want to like, I'm not here to trash them. I think they all have like really good intentions. And I think they're kind of trying to do the same thing that we're doing. But I don't see, we haven't seen any competitors who are actually tracking their data. Which basically means every time we have a new client and we're watching their footage and trying to see, okay, what structures am I seeing? Is this a reactive type? Is it a neutral type, positive type, whatever. Whenever I'm doing that, I'm also then having to go check the database that we have and then trying to see through, okay, what are the existing typings we have? Do the behaviors line up? And if not, is there an error in our previous typing or our present typing? And that sort of forces us to make sure that the system works broadly, not just, okay, you can resonate, you client can feel seen by what I'm saying, but also you fit in this sort of character in the tribe. Like I love part of what inspired this is that we wanted to take sort of what OPS did, because they saw the spectrum of things, you know, not who are you and what do you feel about yourself, but who are you in the grand scheme of things? Like what role are you playing in society? And that's sort of what we're doing all the time. And so Jessica and I will both view a client's footage separately, and then we'll both check our data and try and triangulate there and see where it falls. And as we've gone on and gotten more and more videos, our typings have become more and more accurate. I hope. I mean, some could argue that we're just getting it wrong, but
no, well, it's relative. Like what you're trying to do is you're trying to relate every single person on the circle to other people in the circle, and sort of, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for people who have the exact same type code, you know, like if you order all of the same instincts and the same fixes in the same order, that sort of produces the 7,776 different type configurations number that Jessica brought up. And for people who fill that same slot, 1 out of 7,000, you know, like when you have people of the exact same type structure, they should have really similar behavior, and they do have really similar behavior.
They should show up and feel similar.
Oh, you found a couple. Yeah, you should find like 1 or 2 based on the number you've done, right?
Well, there's a lot more than that, because 3 numbers in the Enneagram are way more common. The ones on on the triangle. So like we have way more type twins like that are on the triangle. So we've gotten really good. We've been forced to get really good at those because there's so many, nailing down the wings, nailing down what we call links, which is the relationship between the numbers in your trifix. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's a guy that we have who is, I went to high school with him, and we typed him not too long ago, and he's your same exact type, but he's self-preservation first and social second. And so that's only one seemingly flipped factor. And so he might have a lot of the same language. And actually, you even feel similar to him. You know, even on this call, I was thinking about him like, wow, they do into each other. But the focus and the language content is different, you know, and what he's focusing on is more tangible and grounded and less relational. And so that's like just one tiny example of like, well, I should be seeing all these similarities because they're using similar language. They're dealing with fear the same way. They're dealing with shame the same way, blah, 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 blah. But we try and find like, okay, what's a realistic expectation of how much variation I should see within people of this same type configuration? And that's kind of what we're doing all the time. And then, you know, as we keep going on, the data set keeps increasing, but we also keep catching errors from the past, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we don't even need clients to do this. Jack like texted me like late. I woke up yesterday morning from like a text from like 1 a.m. being like, this random person that we haven't viewed a year ago, there's something like off. You know, because like Jack is way more scattered than I am. So like he'll randomly think of people, and then I can go check, and then, oh, we had to move her. And then does that fit with the people we moved her for? So it's a bunch of just like as we
cascading, domino effect. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So you guys actually even changed the type you type me as based on this sort of thing.
Well, barely. We flipped the second and third fix because we saw as the data came in that we initially had you as 593. And then as we saw more 593s, we were like, gosh, they're a lot smaller than Benjamin. They're a lot more awkward than Benjamin. And you had more of this sort of assertive charm to you, which is the 3 seconds. So we are kind of doing that all the time. You know, we're going back and vetting videos we haven't seen in a year's time, you know, because I can't be watching 1,200 videos every day, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Tons of footage. So you keep stumbling into old videos that you haven't seen in quite a while. And then as you refine and tweak the errors that you made in past, over time, holistically, you improve, which is great.
Yeah, we found ways to make this process easier, even adding like a date last reviewed section, so we can see like the people that we reviewed a month ago versus the people where it's been 2 years. So it's like, like, yeah, this has been getting honing and getting better and better. So
right, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned something like 3 seconds, for example. So you're able to see that consistently across the board. If you were to take, everyone that is 3 second and they all have something in common,
that's a good question. I think the core type is the primary machine that you'll see, you know, so you're a 5 with 3 secondarily, versus a 7 with 3 second is going to look different. So because ultimately it's a 7, you know, but there will be a shared. So like, for example, your heart fix is 3 and 2. And if that's your secondary fix, which we see it as something that should be similar between you and everyone else who has 3 and 2 second, whether it's under their gut fix or their head fix, you should see a significant degree of collectedness and charm and competence and assertiveness, you know, a willingness to make something happen, you know, and even this call happening, you know, I'm not fully convinced that if you were actually 9 second, you would be running this shop, that's one tiny thing, but it's something that we try to consider. Is someone who's double withdrawn up front, like 5 and 9 together, would they have the gumption to produce this sort of thing? So we're trying to vet not just what we're seeing in the video, but also too, like, what is the role this person is playing in their community.
Yeah, there's also another way of going about it too, in terms of like the orders of centers. So you have like your head center, your heart center, and your gut center. And people with their heart center second are going to do different things with their face that a heart last person wouldn't do.
And 3 is a heart structure. That's why she's bringing it up.
Yeah. So
right. And do you think this kind of thing changes throughout your life, or your whatever type you are young? Like, I don't know if you want to speculate on that, but
we're gonna find that out in the next couple of decades. One of the things we did is we found out that we could read someone's full type at around 13 or 14. So we have a bunch of 13 or 14-year-olds, and we'll just track them.
Well, roughly. I mean, we can't prove that 13 or 14 is like the deadline. The type is probably cemented before that, but it's sometimes harder to see for a variety of reasons. But basically, what I will say is that as we grow and we get older, yes, our behavior changes. But someone's core type, for example, or their type in general, I see kind of as a unique language. Like you, Benjamin, as a 5, are not speaking the same language that I am as a 2 am speaking. And so even though I might be speaking letters A through D in this portion of my life, later on in life, I'll be speaking W through Z. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying different letters or different phrases, whatever, but it's still the same language. And so it's kind of, the question is not, did they say this word? And, as a typist, I'm not trying to figure out, did they say this key word? I'm more trying to see, like, what does this language sound like? Oh, this sounds familiar. Oh yeah, because these other people who had the similar facial expression and speed of speech and eye movement, like those things that we're tracking non-verbally as well, those people with those same behaviors are speaking the same language. And so sometimes a lot of it too is that your own typology affects the way that you can identify someone's type, And so as a heart type myself, I know how to spot heart types pretty quickly. And I think that was something Jessica took a little bit longer to learn.
Yeah, because I'm heart last.
So that's like just one tiny example, is that you learn how to sort of like, like I don't speak Russian, but I'm learning to know what Russian sounds like.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's
so like you're talking about the types being cemented. So you have a head, a heart, a gut, right? So let's say all those are cemented, but the order in which they express themselves, do you have any like you switching my 3 and 9 around? Could that have been different when I was younger? Because it's still the same language, right?
Yeah, we don't think so. It's just we didn't see it. That was part of our competency,
Right. Yeah. I think the issue is not that you actually were 9 second and then changed. It's more
you
didn't have sufficient data to catch it. But I think so. For example, Benjamin, what you and I share is that both of us have our gut fix last, whereas Jessica has her second. So it sounds like a tiny nuance, but if we were to look at like the interviews that you did and I did and Jessica did, you would get a lot more of that sort of low, slow, grounded feel from Jessica that we see in the gut center, whereas you and I are both pinging between the heart and the head primarily. And so there's going to be more quickness linguistically in the head center, and also more eye movement, but also a bit more presentation and collectedness and shine, if that makes sense.
Hey, Alec, look, you got a friend here.
How fun.
One of the other questions that I like just to see if patterns come up is like, what were you like in high school? Because we're noticing small patterns within certain types of like how they're like self-reporting of like how like just like how they acted at that time versus how they feel now, because it can be quite different. I think I'm more in line with like the OPS thinking that like you have your own track, but like that's the 6 course track is the 6 course track. I'm not going to jump tracks at any point. So far, we'll find that out, but
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything I don't know that you want to promote about your business that I don't know, talk a bit more about what you guys are doing, about where you're headed, what you plan in all this?
Yeah, that's a great set of questions. Do you want to start?
Well, what like our most popular product is that we're most excited about doing is when you purchase a full typing and a commentary. And a commentary is at least 30 minutes of us kind of playing parts of your video back for you that we feel like better exemplify your type, and then teaching you in the like grounded, like what you are doing. It's not just abstract, but specifically connecting to theory to you as a person.
Right. Yeah, you did that with my video too. That was really good. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that that's the most helpful. That's what I would want, You know, I want to be like, well, you're just throwing a type out there, and how do I question you, especially if this has started out as more of a guru science, and I don't want that. I want to be proven. You know, I want someone to prove to me why you're making this claim about my internal structures for how I adapted, you know, to trauma. So you know, I want that proven. And
I think that's our most popular service for now, for sure. I think, to be frank with you, that is not my long-term vision and dream. I think it's something that's really fun right now. But for me personally, I really feel like the real goal would be able to teach people how to do what we do. I want to teach people how to type. And so in the long term, I think we'd love to create some sort of class or subscription service where people can watch videos of us instructing them, basically showing them how we identify type. What are the specific language patterns we're looking for, and nonverbal patterns as well. And that sort of stuff, I think, could long-term help people who are actually interested in the Enneagram in a more sort of clinical sense. Because there are a lot of people out there who, like everyone and their mother can just like take a little quiz or take a little course, pay some money, and then you're a certified Enneagram coach. But that doesn't mean you've typed yourself correctly. And in fact, most of them haven't. And so my dream would be able to create some sort of like a course, become a certifying body that can vet who's qualified to actually type. And right now, I think our team, unfortunately, is probably the best data-wise, you know, for identifying type. And so I'd love to be able to expand that and offer other people those skills as well.
Not everyone is going to be able to type 1,200 people before they.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. I think that's the thing, is that like we've had to blaze a trail, you know, we've had to learn, like start from scratch and had to learn the hard way, like what are the patterns you're going to see between people of this same type, you know? And I'd love to be able to take those patterns and just teach people, okay, we found this over and over and over between these 30 different people with the same type configuration. This is what you should be looking for, you know? And so that's, for now, we're just typing clients, and that's super fun. And I love it. It's definitely fulfilling, but I think long-term, I want to be able to have this become something where there's an actual like doctrinal function, if that makes sense.
What were some of those milestone realizations that you've had along the way, without giving too much away? I don't want to steal from your future content.
Well, one of them is public right now, which I think we should credit mostly Jack. But one, there's like doing all these, like having this much data. There are so many realizations that I'm very excited to like actually teach. But one of them was about, and we have this as an article on our site, was about the instinctual cycle, where we had to unlearn previous things that we learned and consider something new based on our data. You know, because we joined in a similar group with a similar mindset of how they were doing things. Some things stuck, like some things like we really, really like still kept, they were good. And some things we've had to be like, no, this isn't what's happening. Like people need people, like we're not like, this is why I'm so excited that like our data is real people and not something like celebrities, because like we're typing real people, we aren't typing celebrities. And so like noticing from actual people on the ground in like real day-to-day conversations that we can go back to and talk to a month later, a year later. But yeah.
I think part of what's really exciting to me is that there are really strange visual signals. So like one of my favorite things to identify, for example, there are these structures we call exposed structures. That's one tiny example. I don't even know how I caught this, but I think 3 specific exposed fixes, if you have 2 of them up front in your type, you're just bad at eye contact typically. And that's one tiny crazy nuance, but it's really consistent between the data, that people with this 2 exposed structures up front will really be bad at making eye contact. And that's just one tiny example of something that we look for in a video, you know, is you're trying to see how uncomfortable does this person feel versus how comfortable do they feel.
Right. But that's like an anecdote. You can't really type backwards with that, right? It's just like after you know the type, you can sort of track that. Right.
Or it would be a mistake to type backwards.
Because exactly. Like just because someone doesn't have good eye contact doesn't mean you can type them out. Right.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Which was really fun finding it that way versus trying to theory on I love having the data teach us.
I think that's really what it has to be, is that if you're not allowing the data to teach you, like you're not going to learn anything. Like, for example, we joined, like Jessica and I met each other in a group where the sort of philosophy was like, no one's a 4. And that's not true. We actually have a 4 we recently typed, who's watching this right now, I believe. And he's a great exemplifier of like, well, 4 is with a 3 wing and then 6 and 9 underneath, 3, 6, and 9 are the triangle, the most common structures, a 4 with a 3 wing and 6 and 9, like that's a pretty normal person.
Self-pro-social.
They're just going to be kind of sad.
They're not going to be attaching. Like Benjamin, you have those 2 attachment things underneath and they aren't, but they're not like this like wild, like rainbowy, like of a person who's like strutting down the road,
Oh,
right.
Okay. Yeah. So like there's lots of presuppositions that you would have, like a 4 should look like this, but you're finding it doesn't. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. There's basically, I hate to say it this way because it sounds sort of trite or perhaps reductionistic, but basically there's a degree of commonality. Some type structures are just much more common than others. And like the more like, as you increase the number of structures that are less common in someone's type, the weirder someone gets, basically. And
the more they stick out.
Right. The more
from like the common.
Right. Not weird in a bad way, but the more they're going to be distinct and odd. Oh, like, oh, that person is doing something that not most of the people we're typing are doing. And to be honest with you, we had to really unlearn a lot of things that we had learned from the communities that we had met in and that kind of stuff. Just allowing the data to teach us. Because you'll get, for example, like 6 and 8, like type 4 are reactive structures. So all 3 of those numbers are going to tend toward defensiveness and sort of guardedness as a default. But we got some 4s who we were trying to place in 6 because that's a much more common type. We're trying to place them in 6, okay, this must be a 6, they're reactive. And then you're trying on 8, but they're not doing body type language. They're not concerned. They're not an assertive type. And then eventually we had to sort of learn by default, like, I guess this is 4, getting shoved into something and realizing, oh, suddenly it all fits. You're watching things that you were intentionally neglecting, specific factors that you were trying to overlook because there were things you had been taught were or weren't supposed to be there. And then you kind of have to be like, okay, let's strip it back and let the data teach us.
Yeah, in my video, you guys were saying the same thing about me as a 5. You guys like, well, we didn't really have a 5 before. I guess you're our first 5, and I guess you must be a 5. Like, I don't know what a 5 is.
Yeah, especially the rarer types like 4 and 5, where it's like we're trying, and even like 1s and 8s, we're trying, like, it's very exciting when we get one of those because it's like, oh, this will impact the entire thing. This will check everyone else in this category, like
right, like a standard
right. And
to be marker.
To be frank with you, like, because so like Jess just said, I think 5, for example, is the least common type. I absolutely do, as far as we can see in our data. And then I think 8 is probably the second least common. I don't know. And then 1 and 4 are also not common. So those 4 structures are really hard to find. 3, 6, and 9 are pretty common. And then 2s and 7s you'll also find plenty of. But 4, 5, 1, and 8, those are the types we know the least about still, because sure, we have data points for them, but like out of like 1,200 people that we've typed, your core type, for example, occupies a really small percentage of that. So there's just a lot that we're still learning about 5.
Right.
That maybe we've already learned about 6 or we've already learned about 2. Those are things that we've kind of gone through just by commonality.
Yeah. Do you ever get people that come in who are so sure about their type and really know about Enneagram, but you sort of have to convince them that they're off? Or
we've had a few people just outright disagree with the types we've given them. Most people have been really nice about it, but that's not going to be type related.
Yeah, that's true.
People on the triangle are more likely going to be like, like not like just like be like doom 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 doom.
Well, specifically, I feel like 6s are hardest to convince usually.
That's true because we're suspicious
and loyal to the pre-existing sources you've committed yourself to. But I would say, honestly, on the most part, thankfully, we've had very few clients we've typed who've like rejected the product we've given them, or not rejected, but just have been like, I don't agree. Fortunately, we've been able to present our argument and they see it.
Yeah.
But we do have some situations, where people are just like, no, I don't. Like, I got an email the other day where someone was kind of like, oh, I have a type I think I am. Will I get my money back if you don't type me that way? And it's like, no. Sorry, you're buying our time. You're buying our time. So there are people like that, but we have a whole disclaimers page on our website specifically for this sort of issue. Like when people are going to check out, they have to check a box on the typing submission form that says, yes, I read the disclaimers, because we want people to know, hey, please don't purchase our service if you're not at all interested in actually like understanding where we're coming from or seeing it as valid.
Yeah.
We are very willing though to like talk. Like we just had a guy email us that we typed like maybe like 7 months ago. Was like, hey, I'm really seeing this number. I know you typed it, and like we both sent him like audio clips and like just gave him like some other information that would be helpful. And so we'll like definitely like engage with you about it. But
yeah. And like, has that ever happened where the person's feedback actually helped you and sort of helped you correct things, or?
Yes, that has happened in the past where one person pushed back and we realized that we were incorrect.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's totally happened, and that's the reality is like we're gonna make errors, you know, that will happen, and it has happened, and hopefully the error rate just decreases over time, you know, as you
And also,
try
if you're checking your data constantly, then you'll fix them at some point.
right.
Yeah.
And that's a commitment we've made. I think that's one of the I think that's maybe the last disclaimer on our page for people who are about to buy it, which is sort of like really what you're purchasing is our perspective at this time, which I do try to humbly believe is probably the best product out there since we're tracking our data and most other typists are not. So
Right.
that's a thing. But also like we're going to keep learning and we are going to catch errors down the road and have to go back and be like, hey, we saw this, but now we're seeing this. Here's why. You know, and we want to be able to do that respectfully.
Yeah. And like, I guess some of the people who come back at you, they don't say, no, this is what I think I am, but this other typist typed me, and they'll throw them against you, sort of thing, or that
They
doesn't happen.
can. Yeah, we've had that
Yeah.
happen before. Not maliciously, but just a person who's trying to like make
Exactly,
sense
to figure out
of
their
it.
type. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like how much of this really matters? Like to me, I think the science is the delight to me.
Mhm.
But like if this client is going to have a better time or like benefit more from a mistyping, that's fine. That's not my problem. You know what I'm saying? And ultimately, like I think a lot of times we'll type people who are very invested in us sort of offering like a counseling or like a coaching service. And I'm not against that. That's something I'd be open to. But ultimately, what I'm focused on right now, myself at least, is the science. I want to be able to teach people and to teach ourselves, you know, with the data. What are we identifying? What are we tracking? And I'm personally a little bit less invested in the process of like, okay, let me fix your life. I can't fix your life. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We're providing information, you know?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things OPS is trying to do. They're trying to take people all along the hero's journey, I guess. They're trying to take people who are like really successful and balanced and not, you know, and take people who aren't and sort of contrast the same type, but healthy versions versus less healthy versions in order to sort of help people out who are on like, hey, go look at this guy. He's doing a good job. He's your same type, you know?
Gotcha.
Are you able to do that kind of thing and see that kind of thing? Or is that something in the future, or?
I don't want to touch that, but maybe.
Yeah, I know, right?
No, scary.
Well, and I also like, I think Jess and I have different ideologies about our own lives, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, how would you measure someone who's healthy or balanced? Like that's pretty
True.
subjective, you know? And to be honest with you, like watching David Shan's stuff in past, like I've had moments where like, this guy's doing great. I'm like, according to whom? You? Like
Right.
you abstractly decided that they're a good person? Like, I think
Yeah.
that
Well, I mean,
think,
I guess in OPS, once you've typed the person, then you know their imbalances, and if their imbalances aren't that bad, even though they should be, then you're like, okay, you're pretty far along, you know.
Yeah,
You've had to put in work to get there.
With the Enneagram, it's a little bit more complicated because you have such a large amount of the populace being one of three numbers. That
Right.
really works into what healthy is. And so if you have one of those numbers that isn't in there, like, so this is a lot what I play with and with that. I get passionate with like, how are you defining health? Because you're defining health based on the 51%. And that really bothers me.
Right.
like,
well, it's not
yeah.
51%.
Based on normal.
I know
Yeah, you're saying
more than
it's
51%.
like the 75%.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's why I want to be like, actually, I don't know what these like more rare things. What is like that journey? I don't
right.
know
So what's
where
normal for your type, basically, is
Yeah.
what you're trying to get to. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
which for some of them I don't know, you know.
Because you're not them.
I'm not them.
You're never going to live their life.
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah. So what else can, so you talked about your one package of like the commentary, and you're eventually going to try to get some kind of instructional videos as well.
That'd be it. Yeah. To make a course and to
make a course to teach people to type.
Yeah. Like I'd love to,
Right.
I'd love for Not My Type as a structure to be a certifying body someday. I don't think we're there yet because we just kind of getting, I'm trying to get like public facing, you know, like our product is now public facing. We've released a podcast today, actually announcing the service to our podcast listeners, which is a whole different audience.
Nice.
Fun.
Well, yeah, I didn't get that link. Let me put it in the description too. Give me the link.
It is.
Oh, it's on your website probably too.
It's on our website.
Yeah, it is on our website.
There's a link to the podcast right at the top of our website.
Oh, perfect.
but in general, like we're kind of just getting public now. But I think the other services we're offering right now, we have some people who just aren't interested in knowing their full type. You know, they don't care that they have 911 at the bottom like you do. You know, like that's not important to them. But they want to know their core type. You know, so there's one product that is a little bit cheaper where people will buy just their core type and their wing. You know, they could just find out that they're a 5 wing 6, and that's all they need to know. And so we have that product. We also have an instinctual stacking product. If they just wanted to know, okay, I'm Benjamin and I'm social self-pres, that I already think I know my fixes, but this gives me a better sense of where my instincts are. And then some people, we haven't had people buy this yet, actually, which is a good thing in my opinion. But you could buy the whole code. You could buy all of your structures without purchasing our commentary. You know, you don't want any of our input about why we did it. You just want to see our code, which, to be honest with you, I don't understand why someone would do that, which is probably why it hasn't been bought yet. But we want it to be available just in case someone someday says, I don't really care about your video. I don't have money for that, but I do want to buy the information.
So what can we expect? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say we are raising our prices on the typing and commentary at the end of February.
It's on all of it, actually. All of the products are underpriced right now for the amount of time that we invest in it. It's been we've been undercharging, and the reality is, as our client base is growing and it takes more of our time, we need to increase the prices. So it's not a dramatic increase, but there is an increase. So if you've been interested in getting typed, I would encourage you to do so in the next month and a half.
And you don't have to have your video ready. You can buy it and then send us your video later.
Jessica loves that detail.
It would be important.
No, that's a good detail. That's for sure. Yeah. So what can we expect from your podcast? What's the plan there? That's
a great question.
Can you share the recent podcast? Like the topics?
Yeah, we can talk about it. So my friend Malia and I started this podcast like almost 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago, like right now. And that was like sort of the impetus of what became our business. She's still part of our team. She doesn't type with us, but she helps host the podcast when she's into it and free and blah, blah, blah. And that's a lot of fun. But the podcast sort of started just as like let's talk about the Enneagram broadly. But it became increasingly difficult to talk about it when we started collecting data and realizing, oh gosh, these things we thought were true are just not true because the data is disproving these like general ideas we had. So we kind of like took a full-blown hiatus for a long time until we felt like, okay, our perspective has really morphed. Which is now kind of like we need a scientific approach to the Enneagram. Otherwise, you're not really learning the Enneagram. You're just talking about ideas. So now we have some kind of fun topics we're rolling through.
Yeah, like we just talked about the instinctual cycle, which is on the website. But like the last podcast we did is we analyzed Saltburn, the movie, from an Enneagram perspective.
These haven't been published yet. That's to clarify. We just recorded these, and they're going to come out in the following weeks.
But Enneagram analysis of what's currently going in culture is what I'm excited about the most.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the fun too, is that people are invested in fiction. A lot of times they're invested in the shows or movies that they watch, and they're invested in the narratives that are intriguing to them. And even though like fictional characters are abstracted to some degree and it's hard to type them because they're not necessarily always playing by the rules of what it is to be a human, it is still really, I think, a delight to be able to notice the patterns of, oh, this is type 6 is a structure. You can see it showing up here and here and here, you know?
Yeah. So just one more thing, just talking about some misconceptions that maybe you've seen about Enneagram. Like that's basically what you're talking about generally, is through the data and through your process, you came from a world of misconceiving Enneagram and sort of having to fight your presuppositions about things. And so, like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you think are still around about Enneagram that really annoy you guys? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I love that question.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things goes back to what we learned about 4s. I'm trying to think of other things.
Oh, I have more. I have plenty. Okay. I'd like to start with saying, like, type 3, I think it's first of all, it's my favorite type. It's the most fun to engage with for myself, even though I'm not a 3. I wish I were. But I think it's radically undertyped. I think people don't have any concept of how common type 3 is. And it's been sort of positioned as like there's a general conception of 3 as like you want to achieve. And that's like broadly true. But there's sort of a caricature of type 3, which is that they're like climbing the corporate ladder. And that's not really reflective of most 3s. You know, 3 most of the time is just, it's a perfect image. It's a desire to be an accurate reflection of what's valued in your given context. And that produces a huge myriad of different like appearances, basically. But it's a structure that I think is really radically misunderstood. And people have no idea how common it is. And I think actually a lot of times there are 3s out there who are getting mistyped as even more common types like 9 and 6. 9 and 6 are probably the 2 other most common types, and we're seeing 3s getting mistyped as 9s and 6s.
Yeah, or even like 7s like can be depressed and introverted or feel introverted and like have real depth there, that they're not just like flippant fun machines. Or even like 6s, noticing a lot of people don't want to be typed as 6s. Because I think they have like a lemming stereotype in terms of like, hi, I just follow my authority. When in reality is what we're seeing is that 6s would make the worst lemmings because of like what Jack said earlier about their reactivity. It's like, oh, I'm following you. No, you're bad. Because they're polarized and then they switch. And it's like just silly things that get characterized that aren't.
Yeah. It's like sorting through all of that. It just must have been really difficult. Like, because if everyone's thinking a certain way about something and you have to sort of fight against that just based on the data, like you have to leverage that somehow. Yeah.
Give the types more depth than just the one-sided. They're
right,
so
one-sided.
complicated. People are so complicated.
So the little I know about Enneagram, like the biggest meme type that I always hear about is the type 8, right?
Oh, really? Why is that? Why 8?
Just the Donald Trump type idea of it, where it's just butting heads with everybody, making noise, and it's just like that sounds very one-dimensional description of 8. Like there must be more depth to.
There's a lot.
There's a lot more. They can do that for sure. But
here's what I'll say about 8 is that it's an assertive type, meaning that it's sort of bigger, but also it's what we call a body type. So it's an assertive body boundary. The body center, types 8, 9, and 1 is preoccupied with basically position. Where am I in reference to other objects, be those like physical objects or people or whatever? Where am I in reference to other things in my environment, and how do I respond to that? And so 8 is a response that takes a clear stance based on what 8 wants. And so sometimes that can look like butting heads for sure, but a lot of times it's just sort of, I want to manage me and my property, and so don't interrupt me.
Or I want to manage and protect my loved ones. They can be very loving and caring. They're just gonna kill someone who gets in that way. But not really.
but right. Most of the time, like I think a lot of the depictions of 8 are actually a lot more like 8-wing 7-ish, which is sort of like a power hungry monster. And 8-wing 7 is not a common structure at all. Like 8 in general is uncommon, but it's almost always going to show up as 8-wing 9. 8-wing 9 is just a lot more common, but that's not really that important. All it is like, I think in general, here's what I'll say. The biggest misconception that I have, or that I had, that I'm now having beef with, which is that like, I think in the past couple of years in the Enneagram world, there's been a sort of like revelation and acknowledgement that the triangle types 3, 6, and 9 are a lot more common than the hexad types, which is 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8. But the hexad types still exist. And most of the time they're real people, like myself. I'm not on the triangle. None of my fixes are on the triangle. And sure, I'm a little odd and I'm opinionated and sometimes difficult, but like I'm still a real person and I'm normal in a lot of ways. And I think that like I wish people could see how really like at the end of the day, the divide between triangle types and hexad types is not that really that big.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. Like at the end of the day, we're all people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's important to me, at least. To have that.
Whatever type you are, it's not going to make that big a difference in terms of,
Right.
Okay, great. Do you want to wrap this up with something that we sort of maybe missed? Anything?
I don't think so.
I think first of all, thank you to you, Benjamin. You've been a delight, and it's very sweet of you to have us here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Yeah. I've been waiting to advertise you guys because of how good you guys did. So
you're sweet. Thank you.
My subjective perspective, but yeah.
That's kind of you. What I will say is that we have a Facebook group that people could join if they're interested. You can search Not My Type. It's on our website. That's probably the easiest way to find it.
Great.
Go to there's like a Facebook button on our site, but that's a little community for people to join if they're interested in talking about the Enneagram and sort of seeing it from a slightly different lens. But yeah, we're growing a little community there, and it's a lot of fun, and people are enjoying it.
Wonderful, amazing. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks a lot, and good luck to you guys in this new venture that you guys are finally coming out to the public with. And yeah.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much.
Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.